Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to give you some tips for painting botanical pieces with watercolor. If you're interested in the real-time version of this painting, you can find that on my Patreon. I will leave the link down below in the description. Please make sure to give this video a like. So the first tip I have for you is choose your paper wisely. Now there's hot pressed watercolor paper and cold pressed watercolor paper. And if you're using watercolors, I definitely would suggest a watercolor paper. I use both cold press and hot press watercolor paper, but if I'm looking to get some fine details like in this Bird of Paradise painting, then I'm definitely going to pick a hot press paper over a cold press. The difference between the papers is a cold press is much more textured. So with a hot press paper, you're going to be able to get a lot more detail, a lot more fine lines. But with a cold press paper, the color is going to spread out ever so slightly, even if you're using the thinnest brush, just because of the deeper wells within the paper, causing it to have that texture. Now that doesn't mean you can't use cold press paper, and I will have a painting coming up doing a red-eyed tree frog where I use cold press paper instead, but I'm still trying to achieve the same amount of details, so you guys will see that painting. Now there's many different brands that offer hot press watercolor papers. I tend to choose the ones that are 100% cotton. For this demonstration, I'm using Strathmore's 500 series hot pressed 100% cotton paper. The reason I suggest 100% cotton paper is you're going to be doing a little bit more layering when you're going for a more realistic, detailed look. And you want your paper to be able to handle all those layers. So you don't want to get a couple layers in and then all of a sudden the paper starts to pill up and starts to disintegrate, because then you're not going to be able to get any more paint over top of that. Now, my next tip for this would be to keep your colors bright. Now, if you do a lot of watercolor painting like I do, and you like to mix your colors, then sometimes your colors will be very dirty, especially our yellows, because I tend to mix my yellow into a lot of other colors. So you just want to be mindful of that and maybe even clean out the wells of your paints before you start working on a very detailed piece that you want the colors to be nice and bright and pop, because nobody wants to go in and pick up a muddy yellow and put it on your painting and then realize it wasn't as clean as you thought it was. Now, I've even added a little dollop of fresh paint onto my palette, especially my yellows, when I'm working and I want them to be very bright and clean, because I know my paint is going to be dirty. Now, another tip I have for you has to do with what brushes you're going to be using. Now, I like to use my main brushes and then a softening brush. And what I mean by that is, I have my main painting brushes, so typically I will use my silver black velvets, but you can use whatever brushes that you have. But these are the main brushes that I'm going to be using to mix up my colors, put the colors onto the paper. But then I want to have a softening brush, and this is a brush that is a little bit more stiffer than my silver black velvets. And it's great for softening out some edges, or if I need to come in and pick up a little bit of paint if I put too much down. This is a brush that's not going to soak up too much water, so I can get it just barely damp, and then I tap it off onto my paper towel, and then I can come in and pick up any extra paint or soften those edges out. And I do this with almost every painting, whether I'm doing a detailed painting like this or if I'm doing a wet on wet painting. And this just helps our colors transition a little bit better. So on the bottom of this botanical piece, you can see I have some bright greens, but then I also have this really deep red. And to be able to achieve that and not get the colors to mix too much to get like a muddy mess, because green and red are complement colors, I used my other brush to soften those edges so the transition was very soft and not harsh into those areas, if that makes sense. And if you slow this video down, you'll see me switching between my two brushes. Now, the last tip that I have for you is don't get too bogged down on what colors to pick. I hear a lot of people say, if only I knew exactly what color to pick, I could make a realistic painting. Now, I do go over all of the colors on my Patreon tutorials, and I tell you exactly what colors I'm using and how I'm mixing them. But all you really need to know is if you see a yellow, pick a yellow. Does it really matter what kind of yellow you're using? Maybe it matters a little bit if it's a cool yellow or a warm yellow, but in the grand scheme of things, just pick whatever color that you see. It doesn't have to be exactly like the reference photo. This is a painting. We're not making a carbon copy of our reference. So if you don't want it to be yellow, maybe you want it to be pink instead, then pick a pink. Don't let the fear of not knowing what colors to pick stop you from making a beautiful painting. I really like how this painting turned out, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please give it a like if you enjoyed this, and as always, I will see you in the next video.